A lot of the time that people claim to have realistic goals, it's often a goal that has been projected onto them by someone else based on the personalized limitations that that person feels they have, and therefore you should have them too. A lot of people struggle with the idea that they're actually capable of more than they realize if they dedicate the time, energy, and effort into doing the thing they say they want to achieve. What is up, YouTube? So, we are now 2 weeks, second week into prep. Weight is holding nicely, so I had about 106.5 this morning, has a total of 2 kilos down. Again, it's not intentionally losing weight this first block. It's mostly tightening things up, holding maintenance, dropping out fluid, stress, inflammation, joint aggravation, etc. So it all seems to be going well. We've just finished my last exam on Monday, Tuesday, which I'm pretty confident we passed quite well. So that gives us 4 now uninterrupted months of prep before I have to go back to uni. So that'll only be about 4 weeks that I'll have actual study and the back end of prep. So hopefully it doesn't interrupt too much. I'll try and make sure everything's out of the way and prepared and ready to go so we don't lose anything or fall behind. But it gives us a good solid run through Christmas and into the new year of minimal interruptions, all business, all work, all prep. So big thing for me is this time of year is actually probably one of my favorite times of the year. Not for Christmas or anything or holidays, because uni's done for the year, which gives me a good break. So over here we have November until March as semester break for the Christmas period, which will give me ample time to get lectures recorded, to get content created, to get resources built out, and basically start planning for quarters 1 and 2 for next year. And we'll even start looking at what our next trip looks like for America. So there's gonna be plenty of stuff to get organized and sorted. We start preparing for 2025 now, even though it's still 2 months left of 2024. That includes more content with young Philip. It means more content in general. It means more recordings, more prep info, more prep footage, more prep content. So again, as much information as possible we can put out whilst not interrupting training too much. We've even got some plans to go up and see Chrissy Black up the sunny coast, so we'll get up there and do some content footage for that, posing routines and whatnot we'll do there. So yeah, all in all, it's all happening, everything's going well, and we have a leg day in the books today. Few variations. First week back from deload, so we're going to just sort of feel out the weights this week, see what's there, see what I can get out of the tank, and kind of put the body through the paces, come back from the deload, absolutely smash it. So let's go. Alright, so SCAF has modified things around slightly. Pretty much the majority of the program remains similar, just order of execution has changed. So calf press, because I have none of those, so that's first order of exercise. Leg extensions, then RDLs, hip adductors, and then seated leg curls, so finishing on plenty of hamstrings. Again, so the main primary focus of this initial phase is, whilst food is still high, volume is increasing, supplementation is coming down. Trying to have a nice little recomposition of hamstring volume. See if we can generate some growth in the hammies. Obviously there was that period of time with next to no stimulus, low stimulus because of the injury. So now trying to capitalize as much as possible on what food and reactivation of stimulus that we can achieve, and try and grow some extra hamstrings before stage. Yeah, so we'll start with calf press. Perfect machine over there, let's go do that. How do you approach the constant idea to have realistic goals with athletes? I don't, because I think the term is full of shit. A lot of the time that people claim to have realistic goals, it's often a goal that has been projected onto them by someone else based on the personalized limitations that that person feels they have, and therefore you should have them too. A lot of people struggle with the idea that they're actually capable of more than they realize if they dedicate the time, energy, and effort into doing the thing they say they want to achieve. For the most part, one of the reasons why I have clients do 12-month, 3-year, 5-year goals is because what they perceived as taking 5 years to achieve that thing, once they narrow the lens of focus and they shorten their peripheral attention, then that 5-year goal becomes 12 months. If you go back and look through our acceleration as a company, international speaking wasn't on the goal until 5 years' time. We just passed 3 years as an active trading company with clients. So the idea that you should have only realistic goals, there was no reason that our goal should make sense for me to be speaking on international stages when I knew no one outside of Australia. So the idea that you set, especially as an athlete, realistic goals, I think sets you up for failure. It's more so control the expectations of the goal. I would rather you set enormous, outlandish goals with the understanding that you might not achieve all of them, because achieving outlandish greatness to me and falling slightly short of all of it is far superior to setting mundane, generic goals that everyone thinks they can achieve and reaching them. So for me, it's always about, yes, starting small and incrementally building up, but I have most of my clients, especially athletes that want big things, to set outlandish goals, because that gives us a direction to work towards. And even in the worst case scenario, they often become better people in the pursuit of that big goal than the arrogance of achieving something small and thinking they're good. One of the things that you'll realize with calf training, even though I have tiny ones, don't use my genetics as an example, is with the calf press, knees are straight, feet are straight, heels drop to the most stretched position possible and contract from where it's most weakened. So that lengthened position where the calf is going to be most stretched is going to be the hardest position to contract from. I just call it starting from a deficit. So you're going to start at the most deficit position the heel has and trying to contract up to at least neutral from there, while keeping your knees straight and your feet straight. So aim for intentional contraction there. Make sure that you're understanding control, stretch as much as possible, and control the eccentric where you can, and then focus on when you're squeezing, really trying to get up and into the ball of the calf. Although mine are little, they used to be littler, so this is growth. Does the being on a diet narrative confuse people from just having a healthy diet continuously? Yes. So in my perception, my perspective, diet, the word diet has a different meaning in a different context. So if I am dieting to me refers to the restriction of total caloric intake with specific macro targets to achieve for a prescribed period of time. Doing a 12-week card, 6-week mini card, 18, 20-week prep, whatever. That is me dieting. Your diet, or just understanding your dietary intake, refers to, in my opinion, is referring to the total nutritional consumption that you have in your day-to-day life and you have across your weeks. So your overall diet is just simply referring to what you are taking in, what you're consuming, what you eat. Dieting, on the other hand, is referring to the prescribed period of time to which we have a restricted caloric window. And that's basically how I kind of differentiate the two. So yeah, I think when people say, it's strange to me now in 2024 that having 5 serves of vegetables, 2 serves of fruit, 4 to 5 serves of protein across your day is considered a diet. You are dieting because you're doing that. Like, people will mock you or ask questions if you go out to a restaurant, you don't get pizza or burger and chips or like something greasy. The idea of having whole foods, fruit and vegetables is somehow a diet, as opposed to just having a whole food diversity amongst your dietary palette. So yeah, that always intrigues me from that regard. But yes, there's a difference between dieting and dieting. The best piece of advice you got from a coach when growing up? It's not so much a piece of advice, although it does become advice when you kind of mature into the question, but one of the best pieces of advice that was asked to me as a question when I spoke to some upcoming coaches, or some coaches as I was coming up, was one of them said to me, "Why not you?" And when I was talking about getting contracts, going professional, trying to make that next level of football, rugby league, getting selected. And it wasn't so much like, why not you as a term of pity or like, what did you do wrong? But more so it was a statement of, if it's going to be someone, why not you? Someone is going to get picked, someone is going to get selected, someone is going to go pro, someone is going to win. So why not you? And at the time, you probably don't process it as profoundly as you should, but when you sit back and look at it and understand the question, it's phrased to challenge your frame of mind and your thought process that it's inevitable that someone has to win. That someone is going to take advantage, someone is going to get the position, someone is going to get the slot, someone is going to get the trophy, someone is going to get the degree, someone is going to get the relationship, someone is going to get the money. So why not you? It infers then that you should put in the work regardless, that the circumstances don't define your outcome. The situation doesn't determine whether you will win or lose. The fact is that someone is going to win or lose, so why can't it be you? So therefore put in the work to make it happen. And that was probably one of the best pieces of advice that I received, probably not recognizing the importance of that question until later on and getting questions like this. So yeah, if I were to sit back and look at that question now and ask it to someone younger, I would probably just ask it the exact same way in regards to winning a grand final, winning the run-on position, winning a contract, winning a title, whatever it is, that everyone that is involved in that process, why not you? Stop coming up with reasons why it shouldn't be you. And that will change your entire frame of mind approaching success. Bring it back. Is there ever a time when holding a grudge to prove someone wrong is beneficial? Absolutely. People get so on their high horse about this idea that external fuel sources are not beneficial. I call absolute bullshit. If you've ever been an athlete and you've lost to a team or you've developed a rival, you're someone that you want to beat, I don't care. Adding extra fuel to the fire is not going to be a bad thing. Now, if it becomes all-consuming in everything about you as a person, you got some things to work out. But having a flip that you can switch, a switch that you can flip is, especially when it comes to game time, court time, field time, and it's time to switch on, by all means, having that grudge, having that something that you can use to personalize the situation. is unquestionably beneficial. And I know of very few people that are intense athletes that don't have something of that nature to be able to do that, or have that thing they can turn to, or that external grudge, if you will. Fuck, I've got them. I have a list a mile long of people that told me I couldn't do something, or that I shouldn't have tried something, or it was never going to work, or I wasn't good enough for X, or I wasn't going to get that spot. Like, I've got lists dating back to high school in my head of things. Doesn't mean it's everything that I think about and do, but those micro thoughts that you can use to instigate or fuel training, performance, aggression, approach, by all means. I mean, there's a reason why Michael Jordan took everything personally. It wasn't because he was a child who found everything personal. It was because the way he played, the second that he could find something personally insulting, inflicting, or attacking from the person he was going against, it took him to a different place. And there's no way you're going to sit there and look at Michael Jordan's career and say taking things personally set him back or was negative to his personality or his career. And if you do think that, you could probably find the door, because no one takes your opinion seriously. And because it's better than Bron. How would you teach young kids mental toughness in life? I've touched on this a couple of times, but if there was one thing that I'd do to teach kids mental toughness, it would be to put them into more and more stressful and testing situations, especially competition. If I were to really try and drive mental toughness, having a young child challenged and not pandered to is essential to the development of that skill. So putting them into team sports that'll challenge their environment, it'll challenge their belief, it'll challenge their self-confidence, have them realize that one or two talents don't guarantee results, and that at a certain point it has to go beyond talent and move towards hard work. And that is where results will truly come from, and realize that just being good at one or two things doesn't necessarily guarantee them the outcome that they want, or the fact that by challenging themselves and trying to go to a harder level or play at a higher level or operate at a higher level, the loss becomes just as much of a lesson as a success, and that loss is going to allow them to develop mental toughness by learning to come back. So taking a child and stop trying to protect them, make them feel safe, put them in an environment of competition that will challenge them to grow and get better is one of the best ways you can build mental toughness in kids. That's why I've always turned to sport as such a powerful driver. As Tex said on our podcast, it's not so much sports that teach lessons, it's captains and coaches. But amongst that, you have to be playing the sport in order for a captain or coach to teach you the lesson. So that would be how I would do it. All right, so the first couple of reps on this, when I get on, because they're doing so many like squat patterns in my program, I'll try and just sit through a few adduction reps where I'm just allowing the gate to try and open up without force, without repetition. So like it's kind of just like an isometric in the first probably 2 reps. Just sit here in the position as much as possible, try and get that range of motion, try and just allow the weight to expand and force my hips to open. When a client's life is out of control, how do you help them manage? So, this comes down to what I believe is the difference between a coach and a trainer. A trainer will prescribe sets and reps, a coach will work to improve your life, or work with you to improve your life and what's going on. So, when a client's life is chaos, One of the things you have to look at is the total variables going into the equation and what we can control. I'll have a client establish 2 lists. One list is titled control, one list is titled non-control. The first thing you do is place everything inside the non-control list that you cannot impact or change or adjust in any way with your own immediate effort, because that immediately goes outside of yourself and there's no reason placing energy there until you can actually impact it. Throw that list out and basically negate the fact that it exists. Because any drain in energy that is spent towards going to those problems is wasted energy and almost a redundant point, because it's nothing that you can impact or change. So it just adds more stress and more friction to the process because you're placing energy into something you can't control, and that's going to frustrate you. So immediately focus on that. And then the next thing from there to do is look at a client's life. What are the 4 primary domains that they operate in? So usually for someone like me, it's training, university, business, relationships. Very few relationships, but they're very deep. And I make sure that they're as a core as possible and maintain contact where I can. Business, uni, training. I will always train. That's a non-negotiable for me. What that training looks like can vary. For clients though, they're not me, they don't have my lifestyle, they don't have, I don't have their families, I don't have their children, I don't have their work expectations. I've curated a life that purely exists for bodybuilding, coaching, and development of education. For other people, I'll have them establish right now in this phase of your life, in the phase of chaos, what are the things you can control and what are the primary tasks, or what's the primary domain that you need to operate in. Usually it's family and work. So during that time, me placing extra pressure on them to train 5 days a week is non-conducive to the outcome of improving stress and organizing the chaos. So having them understand the importance of pulling back and knowing when to pull back is essential to handling that chaos and stress and getting it back under control. Once you have it back under control, then it's a lot easier to implement 4 to 5 days. A lot of the time, if clients are new and you throw 5 days a week at them and they've got this absolutely chaotic schedule and lifestyle, the 5 days creates more problems because they feel like they can't do it, and all it does is achieve basically failure and develops learned hopelessness. So using something like a 3-day model and progressing and scaling from that allows them to build consistent results even amongst the chaos and crap that's going on, and eventually they'll be able to turn that into more and more consecutive wins. Then you add a 4th day, then you add a 5th day. Now they have a continuous structured 5-day training protocol, and they can execute it amongst the chaos of their life and still keep it under control. So they're 2 really easy ways I like to go about it. Should you correct clients' terminology they use to describe what they want to achieve? This is very context dependent. I'm big on language mattering and language being specific because it can impact perceptions of things. But at the same time, I think it comes down to like how pretentious you're being as a coach. If someone is talking about toning up, as a really example, we get really caught up in the industry being like, well, we all know that toning up really just means an increase in muscle mass and a reduction in body fat, so you're showing off lean muscle tissue. We know that as coaches, so if someone says they're trying to tone up, that's usually what they're implying they want to achieve or want to occur. So getting on your high horse about like, well, that's not what this means. All you're really doing is making the client feel stupid. You know what they meant to say, they just lack the proper language and terminology to say it. Educating them along the way, sure, big on that, but getting all high and mighty about it and trying to sound really intellectually superior because of toning up versus cutting or recomposition, to me is just pretentious. So in other goals, in other areas, sure, specifics matter. Like if we're talking about drop sets or 3-second eccentrics and they're doing a 3-second concentric, yeah, by all means, that differential makes a huge impact and what we're trying to occur matters. But in things like a general goal and clients just not understanding the exact terminology correctly, I think we're getting too pretentious about something that doesn't really matter that much. As long as the dial is moving towards the outcome, it's not really that big of a deal. One of the really common mistakes I see people make. And you watch this, you're gonna watch or assess your own movement mechanics. Always assess from the ground up. Build up from the floor to your base, your foundations, where your stability is generated from. A lot of people will shift too far back into their heels, trying to drive back their hips to hinge and break. But what ends up happening is you lean with the bar and the weight, which takes stretch off the hamstring. So if we think about the hamstring like a crane, it's a really easy way I try to use the example. The hamstring is the counterweight to the pivot point, picking up the resistance, right? So if we're using an RDL, if I shift back with the weight, this is all that's going to happen. An easy cue to use is to drive through your feet, or imagine you're trying to plant your toes. Plant your toes, root your toes through the floor so that you're able to balance and stay over the position and stretch the hamstring. So really easy example. I'm going to take the weight and align the bar with about my knuckles on my toes. Now, yes, breaking the hips is important. We're hinging. But what I'm doing here is you can feel my toes trying to squeeze into the floor as opposed to sitting back on my heels. What happens here when I sit back on my heels? I'm not stretching the hamstring. When I'm staying over my toes, driving my toes through the floor, yes, I'm breaking at the knees, shifting my hips back slightly, but this is where the contraction is. It's most stretched here, and I'm leveraging this position, this muscle as the primary factor or limiting factor of the contraction to drive up and pull the weight. So I'm not trying to extend through the spine, I'm not trying to shift my weight back to drive through my glutes. I especially see this in girls that wear the big blocky New Balance shoes, the heel elevated shoes, or the lifted shoes. You're not trying to shift back too far, so far that you balance through the heel. Stay over your toes, stretch the hamstring, use the hamstring to contract. That's what the RDL is for. What foods do you avoid during peak week and why? Peak week food sources are kind of determined based on like objective and subjective digestibility for the individual client. So some people have iron stomachs and will process anything. Some people, you have to be very cautious of food selections, digestibility of that food, looking at the GI, making sure that the body's actually processing the food effectively. Last thing you want to do is load someone and the food just sit there, weigh them down, bloat the stomach and not digest properly. So it can vary depending on the person. But one of the things that is almost universal across clients in a prep is food sources and variability will begin to shrink because we want to limit variations, variability. We want to lock in and make sure that if we're testing rice for a carb load and then you go to potato on peak week, we have no idea how that fluctuation of variation is going to impact the outcome of the look. Different fiber contents, different starch content, cooking, the food volume size, digestibility of it all, it varies. So looking at usually from about 6 to 8 weeks out, things starting to narrow down and selecting foods that subjectively digest well with you. And then objectively as the coach, we're looking, does this impact your weight? So for example, Angie in peak week, she was handling avocado quite well across prep. But then in peak week, when I increased her fats to hold her look for nationals, too much avocado became too inflammatory and basically was creating reflux. And so we swapped out the larger amount of avocado and introduced olive oil. So fat content was still equated for, still exactly the same. Food volume was lower. Digestibility is slower in the fat usually. And so we still had the same outcome, but that improvement was just different. That impact was different. So that's the main thing, is realistically just looking at how you vary your foods based on individual client, and narrow that food variety as things get closer to the show, so you can really narrow in and focus on what digestion and the peak is going to look like when it comes to your food trials, and obviously get on stage. Things that I said in one of our other blogs is knowing what your technical failure looks like. I define this by having a range at which the rep isn't executed will probably determine failure. So when it comes to like a hamstring curl, having a set point, usually for me, if I can't get it past a 90-degree bend of my knee flexion, I'm probably not going to class that as a rep, and usually determine that's failure. Not because velocity isn't there or anything like that, but just because like getting to that first part of the movement, fine, but getting the rest of that contraction, if the set is intentionally and deliberately a full range set, full range of motion, and I'm only getting to sub that 90 degrees, I can determine that that's technically my failure point, and I'm going to only generate probably more fatigue and stimulus going further with that, and so I'll use that as my framework. You can set that for basically any movement. If you're doing an incline bench press and you can barely get to 90 degrees in your elbows, you can barely drive up and get past halfway on the Smith machine or the bar path, then setting that range of failure will help you determine when the rep is acceptable or not. Then it also helps you track and mark progression. Like let's say that I've got 3 sets at 120 on incline press, and of the 3 sets, I'm barely getting 8 reps, and by the 9th rep on each one, the bar is barely getting above halfway. I'm not going to class that as 9 reps. What I'm going to do is work on improving that 9th rep for the next week, so that I genuinely earn that progression, and it accumulates over time. So it gives me a truer indication that I'm progressing, and I'm using that model of having a range of failure, where I can know that if I haven't hit that, it doesn't count as my rep, and I'll probably stop there. So it's a really easy way to consider it, or look at assessing your own failure point. The key factors that are different this prep, I think, is like stress management, environment's different, financial situation's different, psychological awareness has improved. My desire as an athlete is continue to get better. I also think, and I had this conversation with Brooklyn, the mindset going into this prep is basically a fuck everyone else approach. Not in the sense of like anyone that I work with or close to, like I'll always treat clients, they are a priority. If prep ever gets in the way of clients and how I work with them, I will quit competing, I'll drop prep, and I'll do it another time. But more in the sense of like bending my schedule for people or random interruptions and things like that, like being locked in this time where nothing else really matters. We've got business, training, clients, university, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is basically going to be scheduled in, it's going to be calendared in, it's going to be locked in with my TA and make sure that it's actually in the schedule. If it's not in the schedule, it's not happening. A lot of the times previously I've fluctuated to include things and make sure I do this because someone felt left out or hurt or offended or pissed off or had to go here for a dinner. People have a strange knack to think that because you're not eating, there's something wrong, or like if you're not drinking with them, something's wrong. And so I just refuse to go into those situations anymore. If you don't accept that I'm not going to be eating food, or if you don't accept that I'm not going to be drinking, then I just want to go. So having that sort of like fuck everyone else mentality, and just being able to just zoom in and focus in on, or lock in, if you will, on my outcome. I spend so much time giving and building and pushing others to achieve their success. That this is probably going to be like the one time for another 2.5 years, where it'll just purely me locking in and make sure that nothing else disrupts outside of the essential stuff that we do. Nothing disrupts the outcome. Whatever that outcome is, I don't care. I'm going to leave no stone unturned to make sure that nothing interrupts that, to give my best chance of an outcome, which is what I teach my clients. But that's probably the biggest difference this year, knowing that now it's getting to the point where this is like getting more and more serious, and that it's going to be top end of under 90s. It's going to be moving towards heavyweights. It's going to be looking at international competing soon. So those things where it's like all this stuff starts to add up, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years worth of work is going to start culminating. And now it's just past the point of like, this is a hobby, this is an interest, this is what I do. And so now we just lock in and don't miss. That's probably the biggest difference. All right guys, so that is leg day 2 for the week. Expect to see these movements obviously progress and continue. There's a slight variation to order execution today just on availability, which immediately impacted overall load. But we are going to continue to push these numbers, push this program, run this as long as SCAF says. Make sure that you like, subscribe, leave comments. This prep is going to get as detailed as possible. I'm going to share as much as I can, give away as much as I can. I don't know what you guys want to know unless you leave a comment or tell us. So make sure you drop comments below. Let us know what you want to see. Let us know what I can talk more about. I'm going to be as in-depth as I possibly can, but also keep it nice and simple so it's easy digestible information. There's nothing off limits really. So yeah, just be aware of that. Let us know what's going on. Let us know what you want to see. Be involved as much as possible, and we'll give you as much as we can. So that is it from leg day. Make sure that you are signed up. Remember, Season C 2025 is now open. Season A 2026 is now open. So if you are looking to lock in, we're taking clients at the start of next year. Having consults now, looking at the start of 2025 to your working people. Take the time, make sure you're prepared, make sure you're actually ready to work, and we'll be in touch and obviously have our sales, our consultations, and get you on board and get things rolling. So let's go.